Okay, it looks like it's around 2 o'clock Eastern, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's teleconference regarding the America's Great Outdoors, which includes a webinar that highlights America's Longleaf Restoration Initiative. My name is Stephanie, and I'm the host and the webinar organizer. So before we start, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone's ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. First, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen. You can minimize this panel by clicking on the arrow button in the upper left corner. You can expand this panel by clicking the same button. And you'll notice that this control panel also has a list of attendees and presenters. You joined today's webinar listening through your computer speaker system by default. This means if you can hear music through your computer, you can hear the presentation. If you'd like to call in using the phone, just locate your audio pane and select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code will then be displayed. So everyone's going to be muted during the presentation to minimize background noise and interruptions for our speakers. We're going to hold all questions until the end of the presentation, and at that time you'll have the option to ask questions through a variety of methods. First, you have the ability to submit questions using the chat pane, which is located near the bottom of your control panel. We'll also provide an opportunity for people to ask questions via microphone or telephone if they don't wish to ask questions by the chat window. And you can also ask me to unmute your microphone via the chat window if you like, or you can wait until I open up all the lines for questions towards the end. And on a final note, we're recording today's session, and we'll make the link to the recording available via email after the event. So let's get started. I will now invite Tad McCall. He's the Deputy Program Manager for Regional Partnerships for the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Office of the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense. So Tad, it's all yours.
Thank you, Stephanie. We're honored to have the other landscapes join the Longleaf Pine webinar, a successful America's Great Outdoors landscape. In our session today, we want to spend a little time talking and a great deal of time listening to you. We want to share our success stories, talk about our challenges with you, and we hope to then open the mics up and hear how you are succeeding and what challenges you have, and so that when we end this, we all end up as a stronger America's Great Outdoors. Our agenda is pretty simple today. First, we're going to give you an overview of our Longleaf Ecosystem Partnership Framework, so you'll understand the basics. Then we're going to talk about why we've been successful, and then turn to what challenges remain. Then we'll open it up. We're going to try and have a discussion. We would like you to be thinking about how you are integrating NGO partners into your federal coordination work and how you're moving ahead successfully. You're going to see that we rely heavily on NGOs to be successful. I noted that Leslie Jones has just joined us, so before we go any further, I'd like her to ask her to make a few introductory comments, and then we'll get on with our agenda. Thank you. Leslie?
Hang on just one second. It looks like we're having a little bit of trouble getting her audio, so stand by.
Okay, while we're waiting for Leslie, let me tell you a little bit more about how the presentation is organized. It's not only going to be topics and bullets and explanations. We've got pictures of the people who are actually making the presentations, and they're there for a purpose. This isn't just a bland story about accomplishments. This is a story about people working together. My picture is the first picture there, not because I'm the handsomest guy on the team, but for a different purpose. I really don't know much about Longleaf Pine. I'm not a forester. The person who organized this, John Dondero, got injured and can't make this presentation. He is an expert in forestry and a member of the Forest Service. Our team is so strong that they could plug me in from Department of Defense and talk to the team and use John's notes to present. So the first lesson to be taken away is we are a team and we work together. The next picture you see is Ken Arney, Deputy Regional Forester for the Forest Service. And there's a story with Ken, too. This landscape just didn't happen. We had two government leaders who drove this to the place to where it is right now. Ken Arney was one, and he was joined by my predecessor, Bruce Beard. And they took the leadership in Washington and got them strongly behind the Longleaf Pine coordination. Ken, I'd like to turn this over to you for a few comments.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you folks for taking the time to join us on this webinar related to Longleaf Pine restoration. I've been involved from the beginning in the development of America's Longleaf Pine Restoration Initiative. It was a team effort from the beginning, just as Ted mentioned. This presentation today is a team effort. So welcome. Look forward to talking with you folks more as we get into the question and answer session. So I'll turn it back to you, Ted, to moderate the session.
This is Leslie. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please, Leslie.
Apologies. I really don't have much to add to a fantastic introduction, and I think this is a really special opportunity for the other landscapes to hear about your successes and your lessons learned in this really showcase landscape and AGO demonstration area. I want to thank you for all the time and effort that you've put into this presentation. I love the photos; they're fantastic. I have not actually had an opportunity to meet Tad or Ken in person, so it's wonderful to put some faces to the names. I do want to actually very quickly turn this over and just say that we have these quarterly calls. They flow out of the memorandum of understanding that the 9 AGO agencies signed last fall. That MOU sets some high ideals, and having these quarterly meetings, a minimum of quarterly meetings, we can certainly have more, is just intended to, as Tad said, to really facilitate some shared learning opportunities so we all come out of this stronger and more successful on the ground. So I'm happy to entertain questions when we get to that point in the agenda, but like everyone else, I'm going to sit back and listen and learn here.
Thanks, Leslie. We really hope you enjoy the presentation. We're honored to have you. You have been a great coach, a great leader for the AGO, and thank you for everything. Now, we're going to just like to quickly run by our presenters. We're going to have Glenn Gaines, Clay Ware, Luther Jones, and Vernon Compton make our presentations. Let's turn to the first topic. It's going to be, we're going to talk about our mechanics, and we're going to have a tag team between Glenn Gaines and Clay Ware. And here is another attribute of what makes us successful. Clay and Glenn are both professional foresters. They're at the top of their game. They know everybody in the field. Glenn has had a long experience as a forester, and he has spent 33 years in the Forest Service. He's a wildlife biologist. He's been a district ranger. And listen to this. He's dedicated as a regional longleaf restoration coordinator for the Forest Service. He's been there since 2009. So the Forest Service actually has a person dedicated to support this activity. So is Clay dedicated. Clay is dedicated as a person and also by his position. He is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Longleaf Pine Coordinator. Clay cut his teeth in the federal workforce starting out at the Carolina Sandhills National Wildlife Refuge, and since then he's worked with DoD and the USDA Forest Service. Gentlemen, I'd like you to turn it over to you so you tell everybody about how our landscape AGO works. Thank you.
Thank you, Tad. Stephanie, can you hear me fine?
Yes, I can.
Very good. Over the past 4 years, a strong range-wide partnership effort referred to as America's Longleaf Restoration Initiative has come together. The partnership is made up of a multitude of both public and private agencies, organizations working at all scales to restore longleaf pine ecosystems in the Southeast. We really appreciate the opportunity today to discuss how this partnership has approached our landscape effort. And we think as we move into the discussions today, there will be many themes and threads that are common across all of our efforts, and hope the information that we provide will be helpful as you approach issues and challenges within your AGO landscape. And we in the Southeast also look forward to hearing about your experiences and learning from you. Stephanie, trying to make it go.
Try clicking and then moving your arrow. There you go.
Thank you. Before turning to the highlights of the initiative, you may be wondering, what is the big deal about longleaf pine in the South? Well, this fire-adapted forest is once the dominant forest type, covering an estimated 90 million acres on the coastal plain from Virginia to Texas. And for a variety of reasons, longleaf declined to below 3 million acres by the late 1990s. This working forest was intertwined in the cultural landscape of the South. Longleaf forests provide world-class habitats for hundreds of plants and native wildlife. Those are endangered. Many of those are once common species that have now declined to historic lows, such as northern bobwhite. These forests also provide valuable forest economic opportunities through the production of high-value forest products and non-traditional products such as pine straw. And of great importance is the fact that longleaf is well adapted and more resistant to catastrophic loss from fire, storm events, and forest pests such as southern pine beetle. These diverse benefits bring together a lot of diverse partners interested in conserving and bringing back longleaf pine forest. Work began in earnest to halt the decline of longleaf pine ecosystems beginning in the late 1980s and 1990s. There was increased longleaf emphasis through the Conservation Reserve Program on private lands, and restoration activities on public lands were on the rise during this time. The Longleaf Alliance formed in 1995, helping to bring public awareness and education on the importance of longleaf pine. And in addition, there were advancements in research and management techniques which made longleaf a viable option for landowners and forest managers. To build upon these efforts, in 2007, the Forest Service, the Department of Defense, and the Fish and Wildlife Service supported a regional working group representing 22 organizations to develop the Rangewide Conservation Plan for longleaf pine. Released in 2009, the plan outlines an all-lands approach to longleaf conservation that requires both public and private involvement. The plan provides conservation priorities and a needed focus for the diverse number of agencies and organizations to achieve the range-wide restoration goal of 8 million acres by 2025. It should be noted that the gains that we're going to get to through that goal, 80% of those are on private lands. A key element of the conservation plan was the identification of 16 significant geographic areas. These areas are typically 100,000 acres in size, with significant area of intact longleaf pine occurring. Public lands are usually anchor points within these, such as national forests, national wildlife refuges, and military installations. These areas also have the resources and capabilities in place to optimally focus efforts to conserve longleaf pine ecosystems. Clay, he'll touch more on what's occurring within these SGAs in just a few minutes. In 2010, an MOU was signed at an American Great Outdoors listing session in Charleston, South Carolina by the Departments of Agriculture, Defense, and Interior, pledging support to implement and to achieve the goals of the Rangewide Conservation Plan. As part of this MOU, the Federal Coordinating Committee, or the FCC, was formed to coordinate federal agency involvement. You see the members of the FCC there on the screen. The FCC also serves as the interagency team for the longleaf landscape, which is called for in the recently signed 2012 MOU. Members of the FCC are permanent members of the Longleaf Partnership Council. The coordination and involvement of these federal programs is going to be very important to the success of this effort. And I want to take the opportunity to share a couple of examples of how federal partners have leveraged their programs in advancing longleaf pine restoration. The first is the Longleaf Stewardship Fund, which was developed in 2012. Sponsors of this fund include the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, who administers the fund, the Southern Company. Both have been involved long-term through the Longleaf Legacy Program. The Forest Service, the Department of Defense, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and NRCS provide significant support through funding and also are active in evaluating and ranking grant proposals. In the first year of the fund, $2.9 million of grants were awarded across the range for restoration, demonstration projects, and technical assistance. In 2013, approximately $3.4 million will be available to fund longleaf establishment on around 15,000 acres and to achieve 150,000 acres of prescribed burning. Most of these accomplishments will be occurring on private lands. The grants require at least a 1-to-1 non-federal match, so we're able to leverage more of our federal funds for longleaf restoration efforts. This fund has been important in supporting and building the capacity of our local implementation teams that are working within our SGAs. And you've heard the importance of private lands. Another federal effort that is a huge component of longleaf restoration success are programs, our Farm Bill programs, primarily through the Natural Resource Conservation Service as well as the Farm Services Agency. Maintaining these cost-share programs is critical in maintaining the momentum of restoring longleaf on private lands. For instance, from 2010 to 2012, NRCS Longleaf Pine Initiative provided $25 million to private landowners who also provided matches to restore or plant 145,000 acres. I'd mentioned the Conservation Reserve Program earlier. This program currently has an estimated 350,000 acres enrolled in longleaf pine. NRCS reports that these programs in most states, that the landowner interest in these programs far exceeds what the funding capability is. There's a lot of interest from private landowners to be involved. Now what I'd like to do is pass this on to Clay, who's going to discuss the Longleaf Partnership Council, the partnership framework, and ongoing collaborative efforts. Clay, it's yours.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. I'm trying to take control here. There we go. Okay, thanks again, Glenn. Hi, everybody. As Tad mentioned earlier, I started my career working in longleaf pine, and I tell you, this is an ecosystem that kind of gets in your blood. It's really easy to get attached to. I'm sure most of you know how it goes. I mean, eventually you move up, you move on, you take on greater responsibilities, you sit behind a desk, and in the process you collect your paycheck. I don't mind telling you, though, when the opportunity came to work on this initiative, I jumped on it. I've been in this position for about a year and really love what I'm doing. So anyway, we'll get back to the presentation. So we had this plan. We had a lot of great dedicated groups doing great work, and something was lacking. So in 2011, the Longleaf Partnership Council formed, basically to promote effective communication and collaboration among all of these dedicated partners. The Council has been very effective in developing broad, collaborative approaches to range-wide restoration efforts. This approach includes developing state coordination teams and local implementation teams to lead regional and local efforts. The Council has also formed numerous technical teams from its partners to address existing and emerging issues that require attention at the range-wide scale. Glenn showed you this slide showing all of the identified significant geographic areas. Our local implementation teams, which you'll see on the next slide here, they serve as our boots on the ground staff. And if you notice, they all correspond pretty closely to the significant geographic areas. These 15 local implementation teams are made up of employees from military installations, national forest, national wildlife refuges, NRCS offices, state agencies, just a variety of local interests that kind of work around the areas where they are located. They function primarily with local landowner outreach, multi-jurisdictional planning, program coordination and leveraging, and resource sharing. We also have state coordination teams. We recently formed teams in South Carolina and Florida, and that means that we now have state coordination teams in all 9 states across the landscape, the Longleaf landscape. The state teams function primarily in state-level restoration planning, goal setting, tracking progress and work accomplishments, program coordination, and mapping and inventory. Many of you may recognize this document. This is a recent intensive collaboration of the entire Council. It's our Strategic Priorities and Actions document, which we submitted to the America's Great Outdoors leadership as the document called for in the MOU to provide a 3-year planning document for our landscape. The Partnership Council released this primarily to help us maintain and build upon the existing substantial momentum for the Longleaf Pine restoration efforts. This document identifies 4 strategic priorities that you see on the slide here, plus there's 21 specific actions within the document that help support these priorities. It provides a basis to leverage existing cooperative efforts within the Council, and also serves as a platform to develop new collaborative relationships. So now a lot of you out there may be wondering, just exactly what do we do? How do we get involved at the Council level? Well, I thought I'd just show you a few examples of some issues that have come up recently and how we've responded to it within the Longleaf Partnership Council. Over the years, there's been a lot of confusion among the natural resource managers and technical assistance providers about the number of seedlings per acre that landowners should plant when reforesting areas along the pine. Typical thought has been that planting fewer seedlings favored wildlife habitat and planting more densely favored timber production. Well, the Council established an ad hoc committee last year to research and prepare a white paper discussing the pros and cons of various planting densities. This white paper was recently released. It's been widely called for and generally accepted by the longleaf community as providing straightforward and unbiased guidance. Another issue of concern has been economics. There's been a long time there's been a general conception that longleaf pine provides reduced economic returns for landowners when compared with other southern yellow pine types. The Council Economics Technical Team is in the process of establishing a larger working group to meet and evaluate recently developed growth and yield models and other tools to provide an in-depth analysis of economic returns, and we'll submit another white paper or fact sheet or some sort of document when we come up with something from that team. Another issue is defining maintenance class conditions. The Longleaf Conservation Plan calls for moving an estimated 1.5 million acres of existing longleaf pine that are not in the current desired condition into a maintained condition, the actual desired condition that we want it to be in. We're currently working with numerous partners to merge existing desired longleaf condition class conditions into a single working document. At present, there are numerous groups working on an assortment of different desired forested conditions for wildlife, and we're kind of trying to reach a consensus with all of those. Another effort that I guess you probably have come across, as with any large-scale restoration initiative involving work on private lands, there's always a need to improve outreach efforts. The Council Communications team is coordinating with the Longleaf Alliance to expand and co-sponsor their quarterly newspaper. So we'll have one large brochure or magazine type thing that we're going to put out quarterly that we're going to hit the market with and send it out to as many people as we can, try to get the word out. So that's another cooperative effort we're doing with the Longleaf Alliance. And finally, with any initiative of this sort, the ability to accurately report accomplishments is critical to maintain support for the effort. In October of 2012, the Longleaf Partnership Council approved a proposal to implement an annual Rangewide performance report for all the agencies, organizations, and interests involved in efforts to restore longleaf pine. The first Rangewide report will cover the current fiscal year and will be published in December of this year. We plan to use this report to communicate the annual restoration work accomplishments and associated expenditures from both public and private sources. The America's Longleaf Restoration Initiative, we feel, is seen nationally as a model collaborative landscape conservation effort. So we feel that that these partners involved in it, these reports will provide our partners with a venue to communicate the scale of the work being done on the ground, of the accomplishments being done on the ground, and also identify how public and private funds are being expended and leveraged. The report will contain annual accomplishments for 6 different performance measures and also include measures for land acquisitions and easements and landowner technical assistance. The accomplishments are going to be reported for total acres and then stratified by both by public and private land, and also will break out work that's done within these significant geographic areas. We're pretty confident that this accomplishment reporting is going to show continued success. As you see here, there's been an estimated 8% increase in longleaf pine, and we hopefully, well, we're confident that we're going to show that trend continuing. The partnership. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Okay. The council recently completed an evaluation of restoration progress, which showed that the 320,000 acres of longleaf pine, an increase of 320,000 acres over the past decade, suggesting that we've helped reverse the decline in acreage in a measurable way. Additionally, our evaluation established a current baseline of about 4.4 million acres and projected that, based on current program capabilities and current budgets, that longleaf acreage would increase to over 6 million acres in 15 years. So that's basically a little summary of what we've been doing lately with the Partnership Council, and now I want to turn it back over to Tad, and he'll introduce the next speaker. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Clay, and before thanks, Glenn, you heard 2 professional foresters explaining that we've got a system of systems in this longleaf pine initiative that delivers real results on the ground. But it's not only on the ground that we attribute our success to. Headquarters in DOI and in Ag and over in Department of Defense have all committed top professionals to this cause. And coming up next is Luther Jones, who just recently assumed the position for NRCS as the Longleaf Pine Initiative Coordinator at headquarters. Luther brings real experience and a great track record. Now he focuses it on Longleaf Pine. Previous to this, he was the USDA Strike Force Initiative Coordinator for the state of Georgia. Now he's with us, and over to you, Luther.
Tad, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think Luther's having trouble signing on. I've gotten a couple emails from him, and for some reason he can't seem to get on the call. Do you think maybe you might be able to fill in for what makes America's Longleaf a success, or do you have an idea if somebody else might be able to fill the role, and hopefully Luther can join us soon?
Okay, I'll start on this. We've all talked about this. It's not like only one person has the answer. I'll get started, and anybody else from the team can join me. I came to this initiative late. It was already mature, and I was really impressed when I came that the initiative had clearly stated where it was going, and it could define success across all its endeavors. And everything they did was built on a science-based plan that guides actions with clearly defined goals. All of us in government know how difficult it is to develop those metrics, define those goals, and work to them. Well, these are an accurate set of goals that you can measure and meet. Another aspect of our success is this isn't just feds, this isn't just one agency stovepiping down to the ground. We're all in this together. For example, I'm a Department of Defense. I'm not a forester, but we found a connection in national security and conservation for these longleaf pine forests, our habitats to some of our most important installations. We're a partner, NGOs are partners, states are partners, foresters play a role. It's a bunch of people, really, from different occupations and different levels, all coming together. And you see this represented on the Diverse Longleaf Partnership Council. We have a federal government-only Federal Coordinating Committee, which you saw earlier on the slides. We get to, and we do this, there's no Federal Advisory Committee Act problems. We can all talk with each other. But we need a broader platform than that to succeed. So we get that with the Longleaf Partnership Council. And there we've got NGOs, we've got academia, we've got a broad group of partners, all dedicated to protecting longleaf pine. I tell you, having that platform and being able to reach to the expertise and then project out into the community that common commitment is really important. Finally, not finally, but next, I mentioned the Federal Coordinating Committee. This gives us a chance, all the feds, to kind of get together and make sure that we are doing what we said we were going to do and we can plan our future actions. Then we get just a tremendous boost from the Longleaf Stewardship Fund. The NIFWIF is a great organization to work with. I mean, they really know what they're doing. And you saw those figures we're putting in, about $3 million in 12 and 13. Well, we've got over $3 million being contributed by NGOs and other parties, private sector, for example, to match those. So if we put $3 million, we're getting $6 million, and we're getting thousands of acres of longleaf pine maintained, replanted, and we're getting all kinds of good practices prescribed and implemented through the Stewardship Fund. We couldn't do this by ourselves, and we get twice the bang for the buck. And finally, participating in American Great Outdoors. We wouldn't all be on this call if it weren't for American Great Outdoors. And just remember back to the earlier presentation, American Great Outdoors was the setting where we signed the Federal Coordinating Council MOU. And with that MOU has really driven a lot in the federal government. So I think those are measures of our success. I think that pretty well captures it. But you know, we have a lot of challenges ahead, just as every one of us does. And I'm going to turn now to a person who has a special place in the Longleaf Pine success story, Vernon Compton. Vernon is an icon in the Gulf Coast area, and he is a stalwart in the restoration of Longleaf Pine. Vernon Compton works for the Longleaf Alliance as a project director for the Gulf Coast Plain Ecosystem Partnership. Now, this partnership covers over 1 million acres of diverse habitat. It goes from Alabama across to Florida. It has 12 partners. I won't read them all, but they are not only federal agencies, but they also include the Nature Conservancy, power companies, landowners, and Ecological Service. Vernon is also the chair of that Longleaf Partnership Council that we've been talking about. So Vernon, it's really a pleasure to have you on, and you're the anchor, and tell us what we have still to do.
All right. Well, thank you, Tad, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be a part of this. And like Clay, I count myself very fortunate to be a part of this recovery effort for the Longleaf Pine ecosystem. I was involved in Longleaf long before I was even aware of what it was called, because as a child I grew up in central Louisiana in the piney woods, right next to one of our national forests, Kisatchie National Forest. And the home I grew up was built of longleaf pine. In the woods I played in, I ran through the woods with my brothers, and those were the longleaf piney woods. So my career, fortunately, has been based around the longleaf pine ecosystem, and just have been able to work with a lot of fine people that are working to recover the system. So as Tad indicated, I'm going to just quickly run through what some of the remaining challenges that we have with this system, and they've all been hit upon throughout the presentations by Glenn and Clay and Tad. And the first one just being the scale, that it's a big range. The Longleaf Range covers all the way from Texas to Virginia. So that in itself, pertaining to keeping everybody informed, involved, coordinated, just the communication side of it, is a difficult one, but made much easier by the Longleaf Partnership Council. Second is increased need for accountability, really based upon the amount of funding and support coming to this effort right now. Those public and private funders expect to know that they're getting a good return on investment, and rightly so. So we recognize that we do need to convert our America's Longleaf Restoration Initiative goals to hard targets, so that we can continue to receive that strong public and private support. And Glenn mentioned, the accomplishment report, the annual report that's now being developed, that came out of the Longleaf Partnership Council, and that is to tell that story of what we are doing, what are our measures of success. This first one is rolling up this year, and as Glenn indicated, it'll be published in December 2013. Third, fire, increasing prescribed fire. The longleaf ecosystem is fire dependent. We know that. And to maintain that system, we need to be putting fire on the ground at least once every 3 years. So you add that 8 million acre goal that we have of restoring longleaf across the range. That means that we're going to have to do a lot more prescribed burning. And with that, we know there's that significant increase in fire is also going to result in a significant increase in smoke. So we know there's a real balance there related to air quality. But at the same time, with all the partners, there's a recognition that our very success depends upon getting more fire on the ground. The first big step is we've got to get the longleaf planted and restored on the landscape, but long term, that fire is what drives the system. Next is continuing support, allowing for increased private landowner investment. As Glenn and Clay indicated, the vast majority of forest land potentially available for restoration across the range. It's privately held, and we recognize that the front-end cost of longleaf restoration for landowners is significant, and also that the need for technical assistance from those knowledgeable about longleaf ecosystems is ever more present. It will be important to continue the good work that currently is occurring with private landowners across the range if we're going to be successful with our long-term longleaf recovery goals. Our next would be gaining understanding and support for continuing investments. Even once we meet our 8 million acre goal, there'll be a need for continual investment in maintaining the ecosystem. Without that investment, the same causes that caused us to get to where we were, and that would be anything from fragmentation, land use changes, fire exclusion, incompatible development, invasive species, unsustainable harvest. All of those items that brought about the decline could very well threaten the progress that we're making. In addition, we also recognize the important role of the local implementation teams and the importance of continuing to invest in their success, because as already has been pointed out on this call, that's the boots on the ground. Those are the folks that are getting the management and the restoration done in those local landscapes. And then last, maintaining momentum and interest over the long haul. We're super excited about being off to a really good start. We know there's a good solid plan, a broad partnership, American Recovery and Recruitment Act, funds, secretary level interest, America's Great Outdoor support, and just overall enthusiasm from so many different organizations, partners. Keeping that level of excitement over the long haul, especially when you consider some of the other challenges, and right now those are federal budget challenges, changing administrations, all of that could add a different level of difficulty for us. So we recognize those. You've heard them throughout this call so far as our challenges that we're just going to have to stay focused on. But the strength of the Longleaf Partnership Council is just having that collective, broad group of public, private, NGOs, business, just a broad group of partners at the table. So thank you. That completes my section, and I'll turn it back over to Ted.
Thank you, Vernon. You know, I'd like to turn it over to everybody now. You've heard our story. We hope it is helpful. And now we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear from the other landscapes. And I'd like to ask you that when you ask a question, if you could, if you'd introduce yourself and the landscape where you're working. It'd be nice to hear who we've got on, and it's helpful to know where you're from. Turn it over to the discussion now. Questions, answers.
I actually don't see any questions in the chat window, so if people would like to raise a question verbally, feel free to do so. Oh, actually, I do see one question from Lark. So, Lark, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, good afternoon. And my question is for Vernon, and it has to do with learning more about these local implementation teams. We all heard that they're the boots on the ground, but how did they get organized, and just what did they do? Were they in place before the plan, or how has this all come about to have the organization of the local teams? Vernon?
Thank you, Lark. Very good question, and appreciate the opportunity to be able to address that. I direct one of those teams, the Gulf Coastal Plain Ecosystem Partnership, and some of the teams actually have been formed for quite some time, but the majority of the teams are new, and they really grew out of this larger longleaf restoration effort and the plan that was developed. You've all heard that the Longleaf Partnership Council is really based on promoting effective communication and collaboration, because there are so many partners working to conserve this system. And the implementation teams really ensure that that same effort occurs at that on-the-ground, that local landscape level. The longleaf restoration, the prescribed fire, invasive species control, the private landowner outreach and education, that's where it's occurring. And the range-wide conservation plan for longleaf pine recognized that the restoration of the longleaf ecosystem needed to be spatially focused. And that was mainly because of limited resources. So that targeted approach capitalizes on the greatest opportunities that we have in maximizing the potential that we have for success with restoring this longleaf system. So it's already been mentioned about the significant geographic areas. They were selected, and these implementation teams have now been developing as a result of that plan in each one of those areas. So the team members, they include federal, state agencies, nonprofits, private landowners, and their main purpose is to organize, plan, and deliver the conservation actions. So that's getting the work done on the ground. And second, because of that whole private landowner role that we know is going to be so critical, is engaging landowners with technical and financial resources. And I think one of the strengths of the effort has been the plan, the funding that has helped to support these implementation teams and their projects on the ground, but then the important role that the Partnership Council also recognized by putting 4 representatives of the implementation teams on the Longleaf Partnership Council. So you have a great voice from the leaders that are dealing more with policy and funding, and then the teams bring a different voice to the table that are dealing with how is this getting done on the ground. So I really think that's played a major role in adding to the growth of these implementation teams.
Vernon, this is Glenn. Just to add to that, those teams also 2 to 3 times a year try to network through conference calls as well as through updates to share with each other on what they're doing, successes and lessons learned. So there's an effort to try to really network those teams so that they're hearing from each other on what they're doing and their successes.
Good point.
So I actually see a question that just came up from Tanya. She's from the Deserts of the Southwest AGO and from the National Park Service. And she mentioned she didn't see where the National Park Service was involved with the FCC or the other teams, and she wanted to know if we work at all with NPS, and if so, are those collaborations formalized? I think maybe, Ken, would you be a good person to answer this question?
Well, I can start, and maybe Clay can address that as well, since Clay's from Interior. But basically, the footprint of the National Park Service within the coastal plain is not very large, and not a very large acreage of longleaf pine on national forest. Thus, there's not been that much involvement. Clay, can you add to that?
Yeah, Ken, recently Glenn and I both were contacted by someone from the Park Service asking why there wasn't involvement, and you know, we looked into it. Basically, our response was what you said. They just don't have that much of a land base with significant longleaf pine, and what I understood, they were asked to participate, and they declined. But they're wanting to get involved now. They do have some longleaf down at Gulf Islands National Seashore and some other smaller tracts. There's some around the Congaree National Forest as well, and they wanted to get involved. They wanted to send someone to the our last meeting, which was in Mobile, but it was just too far for this particular person that contacted us, works at the Congaree. But they hope to attend our next Partnership Council meeting, which is in Charleston in October. So they're wanting to get involved. The person that contacted us was just kind of coordinating with their regional office and trying to figure out the best way to do so. Glenn, do you have any?
And they anchor one of the significant geographic areas in Texas. So I think we may see increased interest to some extent from the Park Service as we go along.
And if I could just add real quickly, this is Vernon, and the National Park Service, Gulf Islands National Seashore, is a partner in the Gulf Coastal Plain Ecosystem Partnership, one of the implementation teams, through a formal memorandum of understanding. So they've been a great partner and very engaged in our partnership.
Okay. I see a question from Terry. He's asked, how did your team deal with the range of worthy competing interests and narrow down to Longleaf Pine as your primary focus? I almost think, Ken, you might be a good person to answer this too, but if somebody else has a good answer, they can chime in as well.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of competing interest on how we spend our time and what we focus on, but the Longleaf Pine ecosystem has over 20 threatened and endangered species. As was mentioned in the presentation, the overall range of longleaf encompasses 9 states in the coastal plain, and we're down from 94 million acres to around a little over 3 million acres. So there's just a tremendous culture and support for longleaf pine restoration within the southeast, and so it was just almost a no-brainer, and maybe that's oversimplifying it, Terry, but there was just a lot of interest and I'm amazed at how that interest has gained traction in the last 5 or 6 years. And so it's almost taken on a life of its own now with the Partnership Council and all the support that's rallying around restoration of longleaf and all the good things that means for the economy, for habitat, for water quality, and so on. And we need landscape initiatives like this in the southeast because we recently completed a Southern Forest Futures report that looks at forest conditions projected out over 50 years, and some of the challenges there are population growth and loss of forest land to other uses. So if we can engage private landowners, it's an economic investment for them, and they're passionate about restoring a forest ecosystem, and it's economical to do so, and a lot of wildlife and plant species benefit, then it's less likely those lands will go into some other use. So a lot of reasons that longleaf has caught on and is gaining support, I think. And I'm sure Dan and Clay and others could add to that.
Yeah, and if I might add, this is Clay from the Fish and Wildlife Service. There are numerous, as Ken mentioned, plant and animal species that either depend or strongly prefer the longleaf ecosystem. And it's important to remember the longleaf ecosystem and its relationship to fire. It's not so much that we're restoring just a tree species. We're more restoring a process to the ecosystem that is beneficial to for wildlife habitat for the plants and animals that depend on it. So, it's not just we're planting a bunch of trees and we like them better than loblolly. It's more of a process that we're putting back on the ground, and that does benefit working forest and wildlife, hunting and fishing, and a variety of interests. So it's a pretty easy sell.
We haven't mentioned we've got a new corporate sponsor that's going to be real active here in the future, and that's International Paper, who's working with NIFWIF through another program, but they're going to be very active in longleaf restoration as part of that program. So they're another partner that's coming on board and really want to be involved with the broader effort. So.
And I would add another compelling argument for longleaf, and that's how the restoration of longleaf pine ecosystem aligns with national defense. And so many of the military bases in the southeast that need undeveloped land in close proximity or flight paths from one to the other and so forth. So restoring longleaf pine aligns quite nicely with some of the objectives for military training.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bruce had entered into the chat window. He didn't have a particular question, but wanted to know if the other landscapes that are on the call could identify themselves and see who's joined from the other landscape. So please feel free to speak up and say what group you're with.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mary Podol from North Dakota, and I'm with the Northern Plains Grassland AGO.
Yes, hello everybody. This is Terry Miller. I'm with the Forest Service in New Hampshire and part of the working group for the Northern Forests and Waters of New England working group.
Is there anybody else?
Sure. This is Jim Baratheon with the Northeastern area. I'm the Ken's counterpart up in Northeastern area, and we're looking to see how we can work with our partner states to expand the initiative to the southern part of our region.
Good afternoon. This is Luther Jones. I was on the phone, but for some reason I was having technical difficulty with my computer here, and I was ready to speak, but I guess you guys didn't realize I was on.
Luther, I'm glad you're there. I'm sorry I didn't see you on the attendee list at all. Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to share that you would have provided perhaps earlier in the presentation?
Well, no, I think you guys have done a great job in picking up for me, and I do appreciate that, and I truly apologize because I've never had this problem before. And I was just thinking at least I can hear everyone, and so when you called on me, I would be ready to speak, but if you weren't aware I was on, so, but that's no problem. It's been a great webinar.
Great. Well, I do see a question from Tom. He wants to know if we have a template for tracking progress on our action items and metrics to make end-of-year reporting easier, and he's with the Crown of the Continent. Glenn, do you think you might be able to answer this question?
Yeah, Tom, we do. We've got an outline and some pretty specific definitions that we've been providing across to our state coordination teams are really the focus for helping to compile a lot of the end-of-the-year accomplishments work that we're going to be doing here in 2013. So we've developed a set of standard performance measures that the Longleaf Partnership Council approved. We've got definitions for what those metrics are so that everybody is talking off the same page, whether they're with the National Forest System or whether they work on a TNC natural preserve. We're trying to talk the same language so that when we develop and pull that information at the end of the year that we're confident that we're going to be talking off the same sheet of music. And so we do have a template, and we have worked pretty hard to try to be sure everybody understands what that is, and it requires continued discussion and work with the team so that we're keeping track of how we're going. But we do have that, and looking forward to seeing how it works this year. Does that answer your question, Tom?
It does. Thank you. And I will introduce myself along with there's a couple of other folks from the Crown Group, too. I'm Tom Ola for the National Park Service and one of the folks working on the Crown landscape. Thanks for the answer.
Tom, we'll be happy if you desire to see any of that just as information. We'd be happy to share that with you.
That would be fantastic. How do I get my email to you? Do you have that from the webinar?
Stephanie, do you have this everybody's email?
I do. I will shoot that out at the end of the webinar so that everybody can have contact information. So I believe that was the last question. Leslie, did you have anything that you wanted to ask, or did you want to lead the meeting moving forward with the other AGOs?
Thank you. No, I don't want to lead the meeting. But I do want to, again, really thank all of the presenters and the Longleaf team. I think this has been really a great webinar, exactly what we were envisioning when we put this in the MOU, and thank you also for the active engagement from all the other landscapes and asking questions that I know are relevant to the work that you're doing in the landscapes and will strengthen your proposals going forward. That was sort of the comment part. The question part is, one of the issues that you've touched on that's really been a point of strength in Longleaf is the depth and the breadth of your partnerships. And just as an aside that just came across my computer, but a relevant side, one of our partners is in all these landscape initiatives, of course, is Congress. And the House of Representatives just defeated the Farm Bill, which is a source of a key aspect of funding for many of our landscapes. So that just kind of underscores some of the challenges that we all have. But Congress aside, another unique aspect to Longleaf or a strength of Longleaf is your intersection involvement with the Department of Defense, and clearly it's strong here, given Tad's deep engagement in this, and some references have been made to that a couple times throughout the presentation. But I'm wondering if there are other aspects of that that you'd like to highlight for the other landscapes and kind of how that relationship developed and the particular advantages of partnering with DoD.
Thanks, Leslie. I would like to talk about that just for a second. This is Tad McCall, because our involvement also reaches another aspect of a question asked by Terry Miller, and he's interested in hearing more about our NGOs and non-federal partners. We got involved in Longleaf Pine really through endangered. We've been involved in conservation and forestry for a long time, but we really got leadership attention at Fort Bragg when we had endangered species problem in our Longleaf Pine habitat, and we went to Nature Conservancy, and they helped us create processes and protections so that we restored that red-cockaded woodpecker habitat, and we were able to regain our ability to train on all our acres. So there are three components that make Longleaf Pine interesting and vital to the Department of Defense. One is it provides habitat so we don't have regulatory restriction. Secondly, it gives us buffer. Trees don't complain when jets fly overhead, but people do. Longleaf Pine's a good neighbor. And third, and this is vitally important, it gives us a good training venue. When we train to go to war, we have to train like we want to train like we're going to fight, so be ready. To give you an example, when I was getting ready to go to Vietnam, I wasn't training in Longleaf Pine Forest, but I was training to get ready to go in the jungle. And we had to go through survival and escape training. So many people had gone through this training area where I was going through, there wasn't really any jungle-like atmosphere to practice. So instead of being able to hide and lurk and evade, all I could do was go lay down in the dirt, and then the adversary forces would come over you and you just lay there until they finally decided to pick on you and say, you got it. The other thing is we were supposed to learn how to forage. So we're out there and we're supposed to learn how to forage, but all the forage was gone. So our controllers had to bring us food that we put in a pot of boiling water at the end of the day. So we really missed a lot of reality. You need a real landscape to train. Okay, so that's what we get. We get a real landscape. We take care of the critters, so there's no regulatory, and we get good neighbors. And there's another thing. Most everybody in the military really enjoys the outdoors and the environment, and we love our longleaf pine habitat as human beings. I think that's it from us.
Would anybody else like to expand? Would anybody else like to expand on Terry's question about NGOs and non-federal partners, including states? How many non-federal partners we have actively involved? How do we incorporate them? And what's their level of engagement? Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Just from the Longleaf Partnership Council, and I think Ken identified the important role that non-governmental organizations have played in this effort, but we have 10 that are actually members of the Longleaf Partnership Council. American Tree Forum System, the Conservation Fund, American Forest Foundation, Tall Timbers Research Station, the Nature Conservancy, Joseph Jones Ecological Research Center, the National Bobwhite Conservation Initiative, National Wildlife Federation, National Wild Turkey Federation, and the Longleaf Alliance. So, and they all bring important things to the table, you know, expertise related to species, the system itself, management, restoration. But as I indicated earlier, besides those non-governmental organizations, we have state agencies, Southern Group of State Foresters, and Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and then a number of rotating members. Those include the local implementation teams, state teams, we have some industry representatives, university, and then we have some private landowners. So it's just a really good mix of all of the different ownership as far as folks that are working on both restoration, but also bring a great deal of management experience to the table.
And to go one step further, every single state participates in some way or another with this initiative. And many states have both, you know, their wildlife staff as well as their forestry staff participating, but in each state, within either on a local implementation team or on a state coordination team, or you know, participates with council activities, we have state involvement. So that's a plus.
Hey, Stephanie, this is Bruce Beard. Can you hear me?
I can.
I guess the one thing that I'd add to kind of piggyback what Clay and Vernon said, but also the Leslie's point about Department of Defense and Tad's response. You know, as Tad said, the Department of Defense has been working Longleaf Pine issues for quite some time at the installation level. And, you know, a lot of efforts have been ongoing related to Longleaf Pine for quite some time amongst all the various partners. You know, I think the realization that a lot of folks came to was a lot of good efforts are going on, but kind of the you know, typical way of doing business, which tends to be you know, kind of you know, individual actions here, individual actions there, just aren't going to work. And so it was the recognition and realization that looking at this from a landscape perspective is really the only way we were collectively going to be able to respond to this. And I think the engagement of the Southeast Regional Partnership for Planning and Sustainability, SURPASS, was one of the factors that helped to you know, advance that thinking and truly decide that success was going to be achieved by working this truly at a landscape scale and building off of many of those individual successes that were going on at point A, point B, point C, but being able to roll that all together into a landscape context. And obviously that's you know, underscores America's great outdoors overall and why we're all involved in these landscape endeavors. But I think Longleaf Pine just hammers home that point.
This is Ken Arney. I would add another point to all of this, and that's just the way the federal agencies have approached this. It's truly a we effort with the federal agencies and all the other partners. I had a senior executive with the Forest Service that attended a portion of one of the Partnership Council meetings, and as I was taking him back to the airport, he said, it's amazing what you can accomplish if it really doesn't matter who gets credit as long as the work gets done. And I truly feel like that's the way that this has been approached with the federal agency side. All of us have approached it in a way that the cause is greater than any individual entity getting the credit.
Well, great. Tad, I think after the presentation, we were going to try to hear from the other groups about how they're integrating their NGO partners and their federal collaboration work. Should we maybe kick that off?
Let's do it, Stephanie. Other folks, let's hear from you. Tanya, you want to start with the Southwest?
We're so new, I'm not sure I can do that very well with giving people advice on that. So I think I'm here to listen about that.
Okay, that's okay. How about Tom Olive?
This is Julia Ryber, also with the Crown of the Continent. There's,
okay.
Yes. Well, we're one of, I mean, as you heard, I was very interested in the response to the question about integrating the NGOs because we have been, Tom and I, very interested with how you have formed your council with the NGOs. We work at many different scales. We work at the national, regional, local scales. At the local scales, we've got a lot of well-established partnerships that are going with our NGOs, working very well. Some are, I would say, very well represented. They are watched throughout the country. Blackfoot Challenge is one of those. But what we're trying to get a better handle on is at the scale of the whole Crown, how to integrate our NGO partners. So basically, I would say at the local level, we are have a lot going on. It's just at the larger, more administrative policy level. That's one of the things we're working on right now, is trying to understand how to formally integrate our NGO partners. Anything you want to add to that, Tom or Jean?
Jean, you haven't had a chance to speak yet. If you want to do anything, why don't you go ahead? Well, Jean may be having trouble getting on. Yeah, I think I just echo what Julia said. We're very much like the Longleaf Pine initiative in that we are much of what we're doing is based on existing partnerships, and we're just trying to pull it together, leverage it, increase what the partners can do, and focus on the action items and the metrics. And I think we've gotten there. We still have a lot of work to do on metrics and accountability, just like you guys said on the Longleaf Pine initiative, but it feels like we've made quite a bit of progress, especially in the last 6 weeks or so.
Stephanie, this is Tad McCall. I have the pleasure of sitting on both the Southwest and the Longleaf Pine. And as I'm listening to Crown of the Continent talk, it seems to me that those landscapes that have pre-existing relationships with NGOs and other entities to get things done and then become a landscape have a lot easier time making progress and expressing their goals and meeting their goals than if you are starting from scratch. Tanya, I think we're kind of discovering it all in the Southwest, don't you?
Can you hear me? I'm not sure how this thing works.
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, after you asked me that, I'm curious again because I am really new at this, but it seems like at the larger landscape you're talking about the NGOs, the really big NGOs like TNC or Wildlife Conservation Society, and those kind of, if I'm guessing, then those kind of bigger groups are actually going to help you with getting the word out about your landscape. I mean, they're kind of your advertisers, and in that way actually can be fundraisers for a lot of things. Or am I way off target on that? If you're talking about the really big NGOs,
you're right. I'd like maybe Bruce Beard or Ken to talk a bit more about that. But you are right.
And talk about which, Tad? What's
about the role that NGOs are for advocating us, being fundraisers. We even find them very helpful with relations to Congress.
Well, absolutely. I mean, obviously there are some things that the feds can say, but other things the feds can't say. And so I think, you know, again, across the board, by including the NGOs and others as part of the broader partnership council, it's kind of you know, brought the pieces, all the pieces of the puzzle together in kind of this unified whole, such that everybody can play their appropriate role. And I think that's been a significant contributor to the success of Longleaf Pine, and will continue to be, because indeed there are unique roles as part of the overall process, and that's beneficial.
This is Clay with Fish and Wildlife Service. I'd like to add to that the ability for of the NGOs to spend money. Most of the NGOs are the ones who compile and put together the proposals and the actual projects for the Longleaf Stewardship Fund, because they have that fiduciary capability of spending money that the feds don't have. So they've been very cooperative in that regard, and very productive as well.
This is Ken Arney, and I would add to the NGO group also the state forestry and state wildlife agencies, as they bring a lot to this equation in conservation and can do a lot of things that we feds cannot. So another important group to work with.
One thing, this is Glenn, one thing that's been important, and I'm not sure where the other landscapes are in this, but the variety of partners have really coalesced around the range-wide goals that the conservation plan has, that we've really gotten behind across all the federal, state, and local agencies to try to achieve those restoration goals. So that's kind of a common rallying point that we work on at a range-wide basis. But the Longleaf Partnership Council also, that's one of the really missions of that council, but another mission is to be sure that each of those individual organizations, and they all have individual missions, are successful in what they do, so we want to support the individual folks. So that's all brought into the equation so that folks see that they're individually being benefited, but we've got kind of really rally around trying to achieve these broad range-wide goals. And surprisingly, a lot of the NGOs work at all levels. We've got the folks we've got on the council typically have folks that are working at the field level in these local implementation teams as well.
I'd just like to add one other aspect of the partnerships. We have academic and research institutions that work with us. We get a lot of good work from North Carolina State, Texas A&M, and the Jones Ecological Center. Not quite sure the Jones Center, but the Jones Center has done some good work for us too. So we're able to reach back and get questions answered and really some help from academia. I recommend it to the other landscapes. That's a good source of partnership. Well, it sounds like maybe we've reached our natural end here.
I think so, but Julia just made a comment, Ted.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just came in. She said, what is the best way to see a copy of the FCC MOU and the mission statement or any other agreements with the council?
I think we've got a website that most of that is located on, that we should be able to provide people that website address and point them to those documents. I think would be the best way to do that. Clay, Vernon, don't you think?
Yeah, I would agree. That's a good source of information, including not only those documents, but meeting minutes and just lots of good information about the Partnership Council and the overall effort.
Yeah, Clay provided the website americaslongleaf.org, and that does have a lot of those documents on there. So we certainly encourage anybody to take a look on the website and get more familiar with the agreements and the framework and that sort of thing.
And we can, if you have for some reason are having a problem locating any of that, we can send you that directly as well. Okay, just let us know by email.
And if once you've had a chance to look at it, of course, any questions, please contact myself or Glenn or Clay.
And if you're ever in doubt,
you called out.
Always go to Stephanie at Texas A&M, and she'll get you to where you need to go.
Yes.
Great. That's good. That'll be helpful. Be good to see those. Thank you.
And before we get off the phone, I'd like to invite any of you, particularly those in forested landscapes, who may be planning to go to the Society of American Foresters Conference in October. We're holding our Longleaf Partnership Council meeting in conjunction with that, and you're more than welcome. The conference, the SAF conference, starts on Wednesday. Our meeting will be Tuesday and Wednesday morning, so you're more than welcome to come early and join us. And just kind of watch us in action.
All right, so you're all welcome, and I'd like to thank all the other AGO landscapes for joining us. I'd like to thank Leslie Jones for joining us also. I'd like to give a special thanks to Stephanie Hertz, who did a wonderful job of making sure we all stayed on track, and to all the presenters. Thank you so much. Wish everybody a good day, and we hope to stay in touch.
Tad, before everybody leaves.
Yes, go ahead, Stephanie.
No, this is Leslie. Sorry.
Leslie, go ahead.
Sorry to intrude on the agenda here, but we would like to keep these quarterly meetings going. So we need to have somebody volunteer to host the next quarterly meeting. If you're prepared to raise your hand right now, fantastic. If you'd like a little time to think about that, that's fine too. But the call will go out shortly for a volunteer for the next quarterly meeting. And just as a reminder, Grasslands hosted the first one. So Crown, New England, Desert.
This is Terry Miller from New England. I'm not going to raise my hand on that, but I do want to interject before we close. And I really appreciate, by the way, I want to thank all of you that prepared this really fine presentation, sharing your story. It's something to be proud of. And I think it was Julia who talked earlier and said maybe not quite as far along, and so these webinars are very helpful. And I think to us, in one way, we're not as far along as you appear to be. But on the other hand, we have somewhat of an embarrassment of riches, and we're at the place now we're trying to get to the place of engaging our NGOs and partners. I'm not sure that we're to the place where we're ready to roll out a presentation, but we'll give it some thought. But this has really been very helpful to us, and I want to express appreciation for your preparation of it.
Thank you. Still time to volunteer.
Thanks again, Longleaf. Great job today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for joining us and taking time to review the presentation. Have a good rest of your day.
Leslie, I think you got some recruiting still ahead.